Tried to do in the YPC this year is just put on a few different types of sessions, from workshops to various talks, and this morning a round table discussion. So we've got a little table and it's round. So, but we had a bit of interest, and I think we'll have some people come in as we go. So we very last minute moved to the stage, and we'll see how we go. But I think what we wanted to do was give an opportunity for young professionals to come and discuss and debate a topic that's important to them. So, as I said a moment ago, we put a poll out on LinkedIn and asking young professionals what was important to them and what would they like to see discussed. And actually the overriding kind of winner of that poll was wellness and well-being, and I think that's a really important topic. It's probably not discussed and debated enough in general. And so I think the idea of the session is that, you know, it's informal, it's you know, let's discuss it. I don't think any of us here are medical experts on wellness and well-being, but correct me if I'm wrong. However, it's it is a really important topic, and I think it will be great to hear everyone's thoughts on it. So, just to kick things off, why don't we just go around and introduce ourselves? Let's know a bit about you and why you were interested to come and get involved with this discussion today. Do you want to kick us off?
Hello. My name's Sam Pickering. I'm from the UK. We're based at Radpulsion. We're on the Humble, not far from James & Co. In the UK. So it's really, I think wellness and well-being has become an important topic, and COVID has massively changed the picture of the workplace, obviously, as we'll probably go through and discuss. So, and people our age, I know from throughout my career since I started 7-8 years ago to now, it's a huge change, and it's been difficult at times to make that transition, and kind of anything from that you can share, or the learnings from that as we go forward into the future, it's kind of a benefit and a positive. So that's my story.
My name is Meg Riley. I'm the Executive Director of the Magenta Project, which is an international nonprofit to help more diversity, equity, and inclusion in the sailing industry. We run a 9-month mentoring program which helps women develop their careers, and that's wellness and everything comes up a lot in our discussions. Really well-being for women in feminine leadership, feminine challenges, being women on board a race boat with men, and also there's been a lot of challenging issues within the sailing industry this year, from a woman who had a baby losing her sponsor right afterwards, and then all the way to sexual harassment cases and a male skipper losing his job for that behavior for the first time in history, actually. So this is like a huge topic because we work on boats, and that sometimes that's not always a professional environment for everybody. So it's a very serious topic for us at the Magenta Project.
Good morning, my name is Nerdy Powler. I'm a project manager in Suffolk, work for a company called Demon Yachts, who we mainly do sort of wooden boats, but we're starting to innovate in the electric side, which is quite interesting. The wellness and wellbeing topic is interesting. I share an office with two other young professionals, and it was only last week that we all sort of sat down and said, we're all actually having a really bad day. And we never, that idea that, you know, that we actually would have a talk about how today has gone has never really come about before, and so it's really interesting to start to kind of explore that topic a bit deeper. So we look forward to the rest of the conversation.
Hi, I'm Lauren Wardley, owner of Ethical Yachtwear. I own a sustainable crew uniform company, and I sort of believe sustainability for the planet is very interrelated with sustainability for people. So that's where I was interested in this topic, because we're sort of, through my company, we're trying to save the oceans from plastic with the circular business model, but it also very much interrelates with sustainability for people as well. So yeah, just very interested in the topic of how we can, you know, crew welfare, crew well-being, and that interrelates with like how we could take care of our oceans, humans, and the whole broader topic really.
Hi everyone, my name is Pristava McCarthy. So I actually work with James. I'm the Senior Marketing Manager for Marine Resources. Wellbeing is actually a really big passion of mine, and I think it all stems down to we're only just human, we're only just doing our best, and we spend a great time of our day-to-day lives at work. So it is really important to be able to nail that balance between work and your personal lives, and it is hard. We live in a really demanding society, really demanding days, and lives just a little bit crazy after COVID and everything else. And I think perceptions have changed, and I think we just genuinely just need to rethink what does well-being mean in this day and age, and what does it take to find that balance, as cliche as it sounds. And I know a lot of people talk about that balance, but really challenging the status quo that mental health and well-being is not a one-size-fits-all. Everyone's unique, everyone has their needs. And I think we, as the future generation, really is up to us to how do we really best utilise that to fit those unique identities. So yeah.
Thanks everybody. I mean, a couple of you, referred to COVID there, and I'm really interested to just hear a bit more on why, in particular, that point in time has been so prominent when it comes to well-being being such an important topic. Of course the world changed. I don't want to say what changed. Yeah, of course it changed. But what about that for you has sort of accelerated this so much, I guess?
Yeah, it's interesting. That's a difficult question. Oh, is this one on? Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer, isn't it? I think we all learned a lot about ourselves during COVID. We had time to sit and think about what we actually wanted to be doing with ourselves and our time. And coming off the back of that, going back into the workplace and sort of readjusting from sitting, in isolation for a year, 18 months, to being back with colleagues, either 1, 2, 3, or 5 days a week, or however many days of the week you like to work. Has been kind of an interesting process for people to find their own route within that and come up with their own ways of working. I kind of go back to that point, the work-life balance. I actually don't really enjoy the term balance, because it kind of suggests that you have to take from one and give to the other, or it suggests that if you're working full down here, you can't have any fun up there. I kind of prefer the term sort of, well, I'm going to go all engineering here, like integration or mix. How can you make the two sort of mesh together and work better for you in your life as a whole, rather than sort of going, I've got to go to work now and I can't do that, and those types of things. So, and COVID really has kind of made us think about how we can make them two work together in a better way than previously. Yeah, maybe some other things.
Thank you. So I had a personal COVID experience, which many in this industry may have had. At the time that COVID shut down, I was a week after the St. Martin Heineken Regatta. I ran a offshore training program, so sports, travel, events, and everything shut down. My entire business, I worked with my husband on it, so we had our entire lives shut down and nobody to help us or do anything. I also had people constantly emailing me, demanding refunds, answers, and things that I just did not have. So I went through a very brief education in maritime law, contract law, different things to empower me to be able to answer these questions, but also be humble and say that if everyone were to demand refunds, our business would go bankrupt. So being human beings, going through a really tough time, but also we all were in the same boat, also not. So on the surface level, I was on lockdown in Simpson Bay in St. Martin and on my boat, and everybody thought I was having an amazing time, not realizing the context of it either. So it took over a year before I was able to start my business again in the way that it used to exist. But in the meantime, I got involved in other companies and things like that. So personally, I learned to take, to just accept when things that you can't change, and also take a breath and personally reflect, and just pivot and keep moving.
Yeah, COVID was certainly an interesting time. I mean, you sat in an office some day in March and you look across your desk and you go, this is it. we have no idea what's going to happen next. We could be back here in 6 weeks' time. We could be back here in 2 days' time. We could be back here in a year's time, or nobody knew. And certainly for an industry that we're quite a small business, so we rely on local regular work. We were all just we might not even come back to a job, and that's actually quite daunting when you think about it. Especially you've got families to feed, you've got friends to see, everything, and it just plunges you into a bit of a state. But after the whole kind of COVID thing, and once we started to be able to get back into work, that was interesting to see. Certainly, as I say, we're quite small, so we employ, I don't know, it's about 7 or 8 people at the moment. And of that 7 or 8, only 4 or 5 could come back due to shielding and whatnot. So we were having to run on a skeleton staff, and yet everybody expected everything. All customers expected things to be back up and running. Like they click their fingers and they can have their boat built or this finished, and it just wasn't possible. So we did a bit of hiring, and we were grabbing people we had a marine photographer working for us at one point because she was out of her job, and we needed staff, and it worked. So in that sense, it was interesting to see how people were pulling together, even after such a terrible time. But I think COVID certainly changed our industry for the worse, and possibly for the better, because it brought people together. And even now, I think we're still kind of on the back end of some things. I mean, we speak to some companies who still use COVID as a bit of an excuse as to why they haven't delivered something. And I think that's quite interesting to see that people are still clinging on to that kind of mentality. But I think, the overarching thing is it has brought us together as an industry. We've realised that, if you need a job, it can be there, and it's accessible, and people have to work together. So, yeah.
I think for me, I had a really good experience during COVID, which is kind of contrary to a lot of people, and I feel very, very grateful for that. I think for us, I was still crew on a boat, and it gave us sort of the opportunity to pause for a minute because we were so back-to-back busy. And I worked on a really, really good boat, so work-life balance was actually quite good already, but it gave us a moment to actually pause for a minute. And the captain I had at the time, he was amazing. He sort of implemented all these really, really cool things that I don't think we would have thought about otherwise. So we could actually work at 8, start working, or we could work out at 8 for an hour. And it's sort of like, it was really, really cool what he did. He sort of put in a lot of things in play where we would not have had the opportunity otherwise. So we were trapped on this boat for almost 2 years, and the only thing we could get off for is to go for a run, but we couldn't really be in contact with the public. But it sort of gave us this really moment to pause and actually spend some time on the crew, the well-being. And I think it was really cool to sort of see the difference between how people manage the situation, like time to reflect on us and what we can do for us and our health and all that kind of thing, or not do that. So it gave us a minute to actually just pause, which I really appreciated.
I think just going back on how you've ended with a pause and Sam referring to time, I mean, that was undoubtedly one of the biggest things that people realised or had on their hands was the time element. Not everybody did, some people carried on working, but suddenly it was the concept of time and also the concept of the unknown, which obviously scared a lot of people. And, I think you ultimately had this opportunity to really sit with yourself and look at these things that before that you'd just go about your life, not really pay much attention, but suddenly something happened that was completely out of our controls, and we started to we had to start navigating a new way of living that there was a big question mark, like how long is this going to go on for, and how is it going to change our daily habits, daily lifestyle. And I think that was probably one of the biggest things that were a change. So it's kind of a good thing, but also not so good, because I know some people had really, really bad experiences with COVID and their families and things like that. So but what I would say, I like to focus on the positives, is if it wasn't for COVID, people's perception would still be probably quite what we would call now outdated. So taking the time to really reflect on that and actually be grateful that, good or bad, the reason why it's happened, we can't change the past now it's happened. It's how do we navigate it from now? What are the positives that we can, take and implement, again, going back to, because I know a lot of people struggled mentally as well. You know, I think it was that fear factor and the unknown that really played on their mind. So it was really nice to see suddenly quite a rise in awareness about that, the psychological side of things. So, yeah.
Do you think that what I heard then is that in that period of time, we all had very, very different experiences. That then kind of passed. Do you think there's an element that we've all just been moving so fast since then to either catch up on lost time, get our businesses back on track, you know, that reflection of, wow, this is a new normal, and actually I don't totally know yet what that is, and are we still working that out? And then does that then have a knock-on to well-being, wellness, mental health? Because actually we're still just kind of not quite settled yet. Any thoughts on that?
I was just going to say, for me personally, just sharing my experience, I actually was due to start at Marine Resources the day of lockdown in the UK. But prior to that, I had just come back from living in the Caribbean and looking for a job, not really, you know, I was kind of with the idea of maybe having to go back to the Caribbean. It was like, I didn't really know where I was going to go. I went back home for a bit with a big question mark attached to it. This was before COVID, so I kind of had that experience right before it, which was already affecting my mental health. And then had the interview in January for Marine Resources, supposed to start in March, literally the day of lockdown. Prior to that, I was doing a few freelance jobs, but it was like that stability element was so shaken for me at the time. And again, that big question mark, which was really frightening at the time. And then, of course, the day I was supposed to start didn't happen because, you know, we weren't really sure what was going to happen. And suddenly that carried on. But there was that relief, well, not relief, but like a comfort blanket. Suddenly we were all in the same boat that I was already in for, you know, a few months. So, yeah, that was, I think, COVID or not, mental health was always there. I think now, with this experience, there's way more focus on that really important element, actually.
Sure. Okay. So I think really what we missed as a society is that we all went through this together, but we never came out of it together, and we never had a debrief together. So we had a crazy global crisis that we were never told officially ended. We all kind of just like, you know, snuck out, see if we get in trouble for going this far, and kept pushing those boundaries. And I think if a company were to have gone through a crisis like that, there would have been debriefs, there would have been, you know, we went through all these changes, but it was never official, or how do we take this and move forward? And government started playing a different role that we weren't all comfortable with, and we could say things, but we couldn't. So I think that's what we're still missing, is that global kind of debrief. Like, we just went through a crazy crisis together, and what are we going to take out of it? And I don't really know who can host that, and I think that the UN is, with their 2030 goals, you know, kind of helping us push through, and they've said we actually are behind on reaching those goals, I think delayed by 7 years or something because of COVID. So, you know, how do we take that and how do we adjust moving forward? Because this was a crisis we all went through together, and so how are we going to grow from it together too?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think for me on a personal level, and a lot of the people I speak to have kind of moved on to a certain extent, and have actually taken a lot of positives and tried new things and learned new things. Of, you know, so many people, you see it in this industry, so many people throughout COVID got onto the water in some shape or form, whether it be on a paddleboard or on a sailing boat, and those people, you know, you see, I do a lot of sailing at home, and you see those people continuing on, and it's great to see that. It's great to see that from what was a bad thing, people have, you know, found something new and are continuing to enjoy that into the future, and hopefully will do for a long time. So like you say, whilst we haven't necessarily grasped it all, there are a huge amount of positives to take out from it. And actually, coming back to kind of the topic of the talk, you know, the workplace and what I do now is, for me, massively more enjoyable than what I was doing either before or during. So, you know, we have progressed off the back of it, and looking to the future, it's almost sort of in a way a positive thing to look back on, and having had that experience. And you know, we'll all sure talk about it for years to come, and with younger people, generations as they come through. I remember that time and all those types of things. So, yeah. Anyway.
It's interesting. I mean, the whole COVID, it still sticks with you. It was only about a month ago that I walked into my office, looked at the half-empty bottle of hand sanitizer on the wall, and thought, why is that still here? And in fact, it actually prompted me to take it down. But it's interesting on the mental health and the kind of debrief side. As I opened with, sort of last week was the first time that me and a couple of other colleagues we all sort of sat down and went, oh, this was a bad day. And then we proceeded to discuss it. And it was, you know, oh, we have had a bad day. Why? What can we do? Tomorrow's another day. Let's look at the positive points of what we did well today. And actually, okay, we may have had a bit of a cock up somewhere down the line there, but actually, you know, it doesn't matter. We've discussed it, we're over it, it's not the end of the world, and we now feel a bit better for it, as opposed to just sitting there, bottling it up, going, yeah, we had a bad day, not going to talk about it. Being able to share that perspective with other people, you can just get other ideas from it. And I think, you know, maybe before COVID, we probably would have just bottled it up, and we'd have kept it going, because there was no change, you know, nothing big happened. I think that's certainly an interesting thing.
I was going to say actually a little bit to touch on what Sam was saying is I think through pain there's growth. So people who maybe had pain or uncomfortability during COVID and our lives were restricted might now optimize on things we didn't do before. So because we couldn't do coming out of COVID, what can we do, or what did we want to do, and really acknowledging the things that maybe we've wanted to do, and then really realize that when we're not able to do things post-COVID, maybe optimizing on those things. But the other thing I think is quite interesting is the productivity afterwards, because we a lot of people went digital or went, you know, work from home or whatever, and then after there's been this big kind of strange shift of how many days do we go back to work? Do we go back to the office for 5 days? And I know, you know, through friends and people who work for companies that's been an interesting question. You know, do they go back full time? And I think this productivity scale has really been sort of like how productive are we at home? I know that's been a really, really hot topic, and I think it's interesting to look at, because I know for me, I got an office in West Palm Beach, and I hate driving to and from work. I find that it consumes so much of my time, whereas if I just get up, drink my coffee, and jump on my computer, I've saved 45 minutes already. And so it really depends on, you know, different personality types and different people of can you work from home and be productive and optimize on that extra hour and a half per day, rather than commuting and go for a walk or go for a run or, you know, do some really healthy, you know, well-being activities, or are we less productive? So I think that's been a really interesting question post-COVID.
Yeah, go for it. Oh, yes.
Maybe.
Yeah, come on in, yeah.
Actually, on this, I think it's very interesting because I've worked from home throughout the whole COVID. We have a technical team that had to be at the office, and you know, the researchers have been at home. And has been quite difficult, I know, for a lot of people to actually put an end to the day and a start to the day at home. Whereas before, if you went to work, you would never enjoy maybe your commute. Now it's like, oh, well, I ride my bike to work, so it's like you're enjoying, personally, but a lot of people I know are enjoying that time a lot more, because then you have a start and an end, whereas before, like at home, it would have been like all blurred in from 7 a.m. until midnight or whatever.
And these are the really cool things too, like we probably wouldn't have enjoyed our commute before if it wasn't taken away. Yeah. So now we can actually come out with a positive, being like, wow, that commute's really, you know, different people, I prefer my 45 minutes of yoga rather than driving in the car, but some people might enjoy driving in the car because that was taken away. So, or riding a bike.
Yeah.
So it's very personal based. Yeah.
That's a really interesting point for me as an employer, because yes, we've gone through that process of what's the right balance from in the office to working from home. What's my responsibilities as an employer when it comes to well-being of the team? And actually, I've never kind of looked at that. Okay, those days you're working at home, promoting that because you're not commuting for 45 minutes. What are you doing at that time? I'd be interested to get your experiences of, are we, in general, using that time on ourselves, or are we saying, or working harder, or I don't have to commute, so I can jump straight on my computer. And actually, that, working from home or living at work was a phrase during COVID. Are we revisiting that enough? And actually, that just brings me onto what you said as well, Noah, about you guys sort of stumbled across this conversation that maybe you wouldn't have had before COVID in the office. We've had a bad day. But for me, the fact you sort of stumbled across it, does that mean that we are maybe going back to that as opposed to almost scheduling in? How was our day, guys? I don't know, something like that. So there's kind of two things in that. It's like, do you guys see that opportunity to spend more time on yourselves with that saved commute? And do we need to be doing more in the workplace to just acknowledge that actually we might have had a bad day? Just love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and it varies massively as to whether you're a CEO of a company or I'm employed by Brad to do a job. But where perhaps as a kind of startup and new company, we've been able to, rather than focus on a traditional kind of contract you sign, this is the amount of hours per week and this is your hours. My contract that I signed at the start doesn't have anything about the amount of hours per week that I'm supposed to do, or anything about the amount. It just kind of says the office will be open between 8 and 6 in the evening if you want to come. And that it's an interesting cultural shift for me as an employee, and it also takes the employer to change their view and not be sort of micromanaging what I'm doing all the time, and it takes trust from the employer to let you do that. And for me, that's been massively positive in the way that I work, because I come back to that point earlier about sort of integration and the two together. If I'm feeling like I really just, I feel like I'm going to get on the computer and bash out a load of words in my report this morning, I do it, and then, in the middle of the day, realistically, nobody sits there from 9 to 5 being able to do that constantly all day long, do you? So if at 11 o'clock in the morning you can't do anything, or there's nothing to do, or you're held up, go and have some time doing something else, or do something in your life that you need to do, and then come back to it later on, or whatever. But that is really a two-way street. You have to, as an employer, as an employee, you have to be there when it really counts, and you do have to put extra time in here and there, when it's really needed. And then hopefully on the other side, the employer kind of respects that and respects that you're not doing that all the time. When the time's available, you can take it back and enjoy it with family or friends at 2 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon if there's some kind of event going on. It's a two-way street, I think, is the future, basically.
So I work with global remote teams, and a lot of them volunteers, and it's difficult sometimes to hold people accountable for things too, and also connect with people remotely. So I always try at the beginning of my calls or texts, or if I do have something that I need from somebody, I always make sure that I check in with them and how they're doing. How's your week going? How's your day like? and I will be sure to share details about how my day is going and being candid, saying, oh, I have like, lots of stuff going on, always in a positive way that, oh, this is putting a lot of energy in this, I'm super excited about it, but then also, oh, I have construction going on, my ceiling's leaking in my apartment, this was last week, and I had like a Zoom call I had to walk outside in the middle of, because life happens, it happens to everybody, and I feel like when you have more time to understand that context of what version of that human is showing up that day, then you can handle working with them better, especially in volunteer projects when you don't know how their week's going, and if you're so focused on what you need and not what they need, then you can end up running into trouble. So I think that open time before you get into a meeting, just take those couple of minutes to check in with everybody, but share details, not so everyone's just like, I'm good, because that's a waste of time too.
No, absolutely. I definitely, from a project management standpoint, that is a key thing. I mean, if you jump onto a Zoom call with, say, 6 other people from around the world and you jump straight into the topic you want to talk about, everybody's a bit like, whoa, okay, blah, 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 blah. And there's no kind of time to familiarise yourself with who you're actually talking to. Okay, the name's at the bottom there and you know what company they're from. But there's no, as you say, oh, how's your day going? And you go, oh, actually, my apartment is leaking and I've got this. And you can spend a couple of minutes just generally discussing. And actually, I think that promotes productivity because you're then more confident. You then feel like you have a slight element of knowing who you're speaking to outside of perhaps the business perspective. And yeah, you're suddenly more engaged, and actually you might think of new ideas that you wouldn't have thought of originally. So going back to the point on commuting, I'm terrible. I mean, if I'm going to work from home, it means, I'll go to bed an hour later, I'll get up an hour later. I hate it, I'm terrible at it. Fortunately, the office isn't that far from me, so I tend to there's the opportunity to do it one day a week, but no. You're sat at your desk, same looking, out the window, and you go, look at that, and you become distracted. And actually, in the office setting, you're always focused on work in some shape or form. Whether it's somebody coming up and asking a question going, oh no, can we have a look at this? It might be totally different to what you're looking at on your computer, but it's still encompassing work and it's still related to that. You can go downstairs and look at something else, and it just, a little break from what you're currently doing, and then you come back with a sort of fresh eyes, fresh face going, oh, there's a problem there that I didn't see earlier. So I think that's makes a big difference.
I think what Sam said before, it really depends if you're an employee or an employer. For me, it's sort of like owning the business, there is no option. It's sort of, if I don't work, we don't make money, or the company doesn't run. So it's the commute or not the commute, my lines are very blurred with, what that means to me, because time is of the essence. But then again, like as you said, on Thursday you could, have lunch at 2 o'clock with family. Like I go to a great yoga class on Friday morning at 10 o'clock. But then I might work till 8, So it's sort of the commute and the productivity. It's sort of, I know that the company doesn't run if I'm not working. So yeah, it's a tricky question for me because I have to be productive. So
that's kind of the beauty of a flexible workplace, though, I suppose, isn't it? Because you have the ability to, as you say, you could do your yoga in the morning and then work. Say you start at 9, whereas you normally start at 8, and you can work through an hour later. Where I suppose the kind of the 9 to 5 BOGO standard, companies that a lot of us work for, they don't really think about building in that flexibility. And I think for young people that could be quite challenging, because a lot of people out there actually, okay, I want to sleep in till 8 today, but I'm quite happy to work till 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, because that's when I'm at my most productive. And I think some companies are starting to grasp that idea of, okay, you're going to work a 40-hour week. We don't really care how you work it. We just want you to produce some good stuff. If you want to work at night, And that kind of flexibility is, I think, slowly being built into the marine industry in some shape or form.
I think that's a tricky one, because I've tried this with employees before, and I think it is very person-based. I think some people, I forget the saying, give an inch and they take a mile. Like, you start to give a bit too much flexibility, and people very much, I've been like, are you working? Oh no, but I'll do it tomorrow, or that, down the track. And it's really sad, because hypothetically, like, that would be awesome if that's how people operated, but I feel like intrinsically people need structure, sadly. Not everybody, but just...
But then you can define structure in a different way, because it could be your 40 hours, it could be your 9 to 5.
Yeah.
And I think with what you're saying, and I completely, understand where you're coming from, but equally, what about finding the balance between the two, what Noah said and what you said? So it's maybe incentivized for, employees who have been with you, say, 1 or 2 years, once you've, build that trust, and you know for a fact that giving this person the opportunity to go, I have the 40 hours, I will get it done, and you just trust that it will happen, then, that's great. Because some people definitely don't get motivated by the 9 to 5 thing, and there's a real slump in the middle of the day after you've had lunch, and that's why I go back to it is really individual, and I think employers who recognise that and celebrate that are the ones who are winning the engagement of the workforce. So personally, I work from home. And I think, obviously we're talking about the time for commute and stuff like that. Actually, a big thing for me, and a mantra in a way, is I'm only human, I'm only doing my best, and what I would define success for me and my well-being is the reminder to exist, not just to live and, So some days I do wake up and I turn on the laptop and start working, and some days I will get up early, go to the gym, really enjoy my breakfast, not eat whilst I'm working. So it's like really savouring that time to really exist in that moment. That's a real big one for me personally, to when it comes to the well-being part.
I think that's a really powerful comment. Remember to exist. Yeah, no, that's really really good. We had something from the.
I just wanted to add, there is a scale factor to what you're talking about as well, from management and employer perspective. So I employ 75 people currently. So from for that scale, it becomes a nightmare to manage people doing different things, and you have some people that you trust, and you have some people that haven't earned that trust or have particularly earned the loss of trust. So that is just a factor to consider as well, particularly for bigger businesses. There's definitely a scale factor where you get to the point where it becomes very challenging to manage this sort of approach. It's not to say that it shouldn't be attempted, but it's has its challenges that are.
Have you ever considered perhaps a structure where you see similarities in, certain people really enjoying the one structure and other people the other, which is, where you give them a little bit more freedom to maybe sort of channel that when it comes to management?
And we've been running a very flexible workplace for a long time, long before COVID. Giving our team a lot of flexibility, but there's definitely been, we suffer the consequences of quite a few people taking advantage of that too. And on balance, we tend to carry on with our flexible workplace, but we definitely burn a lot of, there's a lot of collateral from doing that.
Do you think COVID accelerated that?
That's an individual thing, and some people made it much, much worse. And for us personally, a smaller percentage of people have made it better.
I'd like to second what you're saying there. From if you're looking at it from an employer perspective, for me personally, this is just me. Everybody's different. I've worked in fast-paced sales environments where we are results-driven. If you're not performing, if you're not delivering, what are you doing? There's always been a real regiment of structure in what I do. I do a lot of work with the Ministry of Defence and the Army. I'm a reservist in the infantry, so there's structure in what we do there as well. So in terms of you're talking about flexibility of people, for me, I think there needs to be an element of flexibility. The times change rapidly. Look at 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. Christ, everything has changed and how quickly the working environment is changing. But I agree with what you're saying in terms of having an element of structure, because you can't have people taking liberties, because yes, work-life balance is crucial for everybody. Everybody's got their own struggles, they've got bills to pay, life, that's what life is. But yeah, I think I agree saying there needs to be some element of structure, particularly if you're working in that environment that is driven for sales or standards, or you've got customer expectations. I'm quite happy to work at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, but I'm also quite happy to work until 10, 11 o'clock at night. I work with customers in Southeast Asia and people over in the USA, so I have to be flexible with my time. I think if you're an employee, you can't take liberties. And if there is structure and people are starting to not turn the screws but apply the pressure and say, come on, you have to give that back to your employer as well.
Thank you. Thanks for the inputs. Do you want to add something?
I live in Sweden. I don't come from Sweden, but for sure Sweden is a country where well-being, balance and everything is gold standards, I would say. And I think when I went to Sweden, I thought, it could be that people do take advantage of all the maternity, paternity, a lot of different things that add up. And in reality, I think that has worked for many years, that it doesn't really happen. So there is the flexibility of working from home, of being away for family and stuff like that. And on average, everything works out quite well. And I think it's because we have, goal settings and really we review kind of what is supposed to be done and when and timelines and stuff like that quite regularly. And so if you have your 40 hours in theory, but you work on the weekend, or you work in the evening, or you work in the morning, or you're away with your family, but you still do the work, I think it does, it works out very well. And we are in a big, in a big company, more than, now it became 3,500, but it used to be 100 people. And I think building the behavioral kind of ideas of the whole society living like that, it takes some time, but at the end of the day, not everyone is an asshole that takes an arm instead of when you give him a finger, and you can get rid of those people if they don't work. And I think if you build it as in a trust-based environment where you as an employee can work in your time, but you need to deliver at this
it's setting your expectations, your standards.
Exactly. So it's not that you need to be here at 9 and leave at 5, but in a month's time you have this deadline and you need to do it. I think I see it as an approach which worked out very well, and but it needs to be the whole kind of society doing it.
I just want to add something really quickly just on that. I don't necessarily think, sorry to criticize, but like it's an arsehole or not. I think it's very person-based of how we work well, and some people just need structure. I've had great employees that just don't work well with flexibility. Really great, like their work's fantastic, they're kind, lovely people, not even close to being an arsehole, so to speak, but they're just not good without structure. And I think inside we're just different, and it's also jobs-based too, like sales. If you're achieving sales and you can make commission or money or something off extra sales, you're probably going to work, or if it's just like a role where you need to get some tasks done and it's not as sort of sales-based. So I think it really comes down to the job and the type of person too. Like, neither is bad or right or wrong. It just really depends on the situation.
It's really interesting, and we wanted to keep this a very kind of broad topic to see where it goes. But clearly the link between work-life balance, how businesses structure their working practices, and how good or not we are with our own time, it all seems to feed the wellness, well-being topic. We've heard many different options of how companies are structuring themselves, how everybody's managing their own time. Is there an element where the fact that it is still very new, post-COVID, because we started there, and the stresses of, I don't actually really know how I'm meant to be managing my life now with maybe this new flexibility or with these new company structures, does that actually have a bit of a knock-on effect to wellness and well-being? That there isn't that structure or enough structure now that maybe if you're a person who needs it, or we are a person who needs it and we just don't have that flexibility. And because I think someone said it's very, very individual, right? One of the things I'm hearing is that maybe we're still a long way away from getting that new normal settled in, and that is affecting wellness and well-being. But do we have almost a responsibility to make sure that we are continuing to check in with each other, to making it a priority in our business? Are we giving the right working practices to our people? Are we asking for a different working practice if it doesn't suit us? Are we kind of left to figure this out on our own, or do we need to do more working together, discussing it and making it a real topic? I'm just keen to get your thoughts.
I think it also varies on the size of the business. If it's a small business, I think there's a real great value of, the team. Obviously the team ultimately becomes close, asking each other, how are you doing, spending that time just, maybe once a week or whenever, I don't know, just like not leaving it too long before having to ask a really normal human question, like, how are you doing? Or, I see you're not quite yourself today, how's that going? On the flip side of that, it's a really big company. I think companies of a larger scale could really benefit with like a well-being advisor potentially, or someone who really takes care of that, almost like a bit of an HR element. But that hasn't got anything to do with the performance and like the work part of that individual. It's actually more the human part, where it's like, are you all right? Is there anything that we can do? Just that sort of checking in, but on a bit of a corporate level. Because I think when it is quite corporate and quite big, it becomes a little bit intimidating to really go, actually, I'm not okay. Whereas if it's a smaller business, I think there's a lot of understanding that, we're very similar, we're very open, it's a more approachable environment.
Hi.
Yeah, hi. We are talking about like businesses and like in itself, but we don't really talk about like, because we are in like the young professional club, but how do you get that through if you're a young professional and the people that you work with are older than you, have always been doing that, and like for them, I've been on this road, I've been doing the straight line, like basically like I've lived it.
The generational.
How do you get through that generational gap to say like,
Good
I'd
question.
like to put my well-being to not end up like you at some point?
That is a really good question, by the way, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know, what do we think, guys?
Coming back to the very start, so like, I graduated in 2018, whatever, in sort of the 5-6 years, my career has gone from being in a kind of manufacturing environment that was old school. You literally you take your card at the start of the day, clock in, and if you were 2 minutes late, more than how many times a week or a month, you got dragged into the office and said, what are you doing here, blah blah blah, to like as I just described, a completely kind of agile, flexible environment with everything between. I've been online, I've been in a dockyard down at Plymouth. It's kind of experienced the whole thing, and it is. I think we've had such a step change all of a sudden. You could probably, like that chap over there, individual said, you could see the gradual progression towards it. But we've had such a step change that it's now kind of, coming back to James's point, we're not settled into it yet. It's taken time to progress that through, and it kind of is harder as a younger generation to sort of stand up to people and say, well, that's kind of not the way it's done anymore, or whatever, it's really hard. It is a really difficult. I'm not sure where I'm going with this now. It is a very difficult kind of scenario, but the one thing I would just say add on is have the confidence in yourself to make your opinion heard and valid, and speak to people about it. Don't just sit there and shrivel up and go, I don't know what to do, I'm just going to keep typing or keep my head down. You know, talk to people and just be yourself. Ultimately you will do your best in your work and life, whatever it is, if you're enjoying that thing and can be yourself. Do it. That was a bit of a ramble, wasn't it? Sorry.
Thank you. So for the generational gap, I think there's usually two main issues for resisting positive change. One is a lack of understanding, and the other one is ego. So I haven't solved the ego problem yet, so I'll give you my solution to one. And ego thing is really for you more to just accept, identify and understand, but that's not after you already did step one. And step one is to professionally make your case. If it's probably lack of understanding why you're not making why they can't make positive changes, because we used to do this, I only know this, is what that really means. I only know this. So then you just spend the time professionally, respectfully, offering the solution in a very well articulated case. Here's options for results. You can even maybe do a little bit, ask for forgiveness later, see how far you can take that to show results, because so that it's not, you know, just a hypothetical, that it is real. Bringing competitors, our competitors are doing this, why aren't we doing this? That usually has a good idea of like, oh, wait a second, now I care. Because it's not you that's saying you should change, it's their competitors, and they listen to competitors. And then the ego thing, yeah, sorry, anybody have an answer? I deal with this all the time, whether it's male egos, older female egos. It's very, very difficult. It can be just completely debilitating. But once you get through that process of putting in the effort to identify the case, and if you know you made a great case and you're confident about it, and it still is not being received, understand that there are some things that you can't change.
Yeah.
Good summarising thoughts on my mind.
Oh, here for you, that's what I'm after you.
Definitely, I mean, it's certainly a really big problem that I think nobody, well, as you say, young professionals don't, it's quite hard to go about, because you can't really go to your boss or your superior and go, I don't really feel this today, and they go, well, what do you mean, you're here to work? It's almost a taboo subject in many ways, but I think certainly your point of make a case for yourself. If you're a diligent employee, you work hard, you deliver results, and you make a decent case that actually, I need to do this because my mental health is X. I think that's all you can do, and if you can't bring it, but you can't force change in the industry. You know, maybe if you present your case and you think it's good, and your employer still goes no, doesn't take your point into account, then maybe it's time for your own personal change. Yeah. Is all I would say. You know, some people just won't change.
Also know that no means no now. So if they say no, that means no now with these current circumstances and things like that. So that doesn't mean no forever either. So, you know, understand why no now, and be like, okay, I hear you that we can't do this now. When do you think we could do this in the future? Do you think it's possible? What do we need to do to be able to make this happen? So you can start breaking down the barriers of what no means.
I think it's interesting. So when I quit working on board, I had the fear of running my own company full time, and so I signed up for a couple of banquet shifts at different hotels where I live. And one hotel actually gives you $150 a month if you show up to work on time. So this generationally, so like back home in Australia when I used to manage hotels before I used to work on board, if you didn't show up to work at a hotel or any establishment, you'd lose your job. Now they're paying people more money if you come on time. So I think there's different incentives in different ways companies are trying to work with the generational change or mentality. And then I was talking to another girl similar age as the general employees at this place, and she couldn't understand why she had to be at work on time. She's like, nothing happens for the first half an hour of the day. And she was a 9 to 5 employee, and she's like, I keep getting in trouble, but nothing happens between 9 and 9:30. And to me, it blew my mind. I was like, what do you mean? Like, you know, you have to start work on time. It's completely different to, I suppose, when I worked. But I think, take it back to Wellbeing, and I think the better we are mentally and physically, the more productive we're going to be. So it's really different ways to manage that. I mean, there's everything now from like Slack grew massively during COVID, connection, staying intact, and there's even platforms now like CPR Fitness who are now fostering communities of well-being within the workplace, specifically on board, that are creating communities of well-being. And then apps and coaching and nutritional and physical coaching and things like that. And I believe in things like sort of platforms like that, because the more healthy we are and the better well-being we have, the more productive we're going to be at the end of the day. So I think, to take it back to the essence of the topic, really is like, the better we're looked after by our employees, whether that's paying us more or implementing some pretty awesome platforms that are available to us now, the better we're looked after, the better we're going to work. And it just depends on where you're working, the generation, and who that is, of how to sort of navigate that.
Yeah,
I'd like to touch on that as well, and taking it back to the employee-employer side of things. You've spoken about how quickly things have changed. I think there needs to be an element of give and take, both from an employee perspective and an employer perspective. Don't forget, they're in a position, they've built the company, they've gone through probably horrendous amounts of change, and so many different changes throughout building that company as well. They're probably learning more and more every day. You know, we're not the Oracle that owns the complete perfect package. So if there are needs, and I didn't catch your name in the middle.
Meg.
And you touched on it perfectly about how, like, build your case.
Yeah.
Build your case. You know, if there's something you don't agree with, or there's a different way that you could perhaps look at a process or the way things are being done, put it in a constructive manner. Because if it's constructive and you've got the evidence, and I think you touched on it earlier about really building your case towards it, perfect.
And I think in a very traditional, structured way, there are also different paths you could go through. So yes, build your case to your manager, but also maybe there is an HR person, and there are different people you could talk to at the same time, I guess. And
yeah, go ahead.
I think just the other point on that is that wellness starts with you. I know we're spending a lot of time talking about the ego as a manager, or how do we educate, and I agree, it's all of our responsibility to educate the dinosaurs that might not quite get it, but wellness starts with an individual, and we can all do things personally. And I think to Lauren's point, it's about accessibility. If those tools and those bits of advice are all accessible to us, it might just be a 10-minute decompression that you need at the end of the day that brings you back level again, but it's about accessibility. And what we don't want to do is get caught up on people that don't want to be on that journey. Let's focus on those that do, and if we can collaborate and communicate, we end up with the ball starts rolling, and I think we all then provide a better experience to our owners, to our guests, to whatever it might be. So that's just my...
Yeah, thank you, absolutely. Just an eye on time, I will just summarise a few things, but feel free to jump in if there's anything else. But you know, we've covered quite a lot of ground in an hour, and for me, one of the most important things is that this has brought the topic onto the table, and I wonder, from what I've been hearing, in that, you know, we went straight to COVID at the beginning, and you know, that is obviously was a catalyst for so much. It was a catalyst for us to, I think, young professionals or not, to talk about our well-being, our mental health. You know, what are we doing from a wellness point of view? It brought that topic forward. I just wonder whether the world did just find its own way out after lockdowns and things like that, and maybe we've sort of forgotten to debrief. I think that's a really, really good point. And we still talk about mental health and our well-being, but maybe we are forgetting to check in enough with each other, but keep the conversation going. And maybe to your point, as you know, as a young professional club, you know, it probably is this demographic that just needs to keep the conversation going, needs to keep feeding into our employers, but also each other, to remind us that, you know, it is really, really important. And actually, if we are focused on our well-being, and our mental health, that we are going to be more productive in the workplace, and it is just it's just a commercial conversation at that point with maybe some of those dinosaur companies. But the key thing for me is, let's not forget that we haven't quite figured this out yet, and but I think there's some great examples that have been around for a long time, even before COVID, like the working practices in Sweden, that we can learn from. You know, we're not completely reinventing the wheel here, but together we can come up with some really, really great solutions. And I think that is maybe an important job for the YPC, you know, going forwards, to help drive and remind the industry that we still haven't quite figured this bit out yet. And let's not forget about it, and let's not fall back into those old practices. Thank you very much to everybody. That was a really interesting conversation, and thank you to you guys for getting involved from the floor. It was, I think this is something that we need to keep doing, and one of the ambitions that we have with our kind of role and partnership with METSTRADE and the YPC is to maybe try and host a few more of these online throughout the year. We don't want this to be a 3-day-a-year thing. We want this to be a community that is ongoing, that just happens to have a trade show 3 days a year. All right. So I think that'd be great.